Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us today. We have a brand new story to share with you, so let's get started. My name is Sam, and for the past 10 years, I believe I had a strong and stable marriage. I work as a truck driver, one of those guys you see steering massive rigs across the country, transporting everything from groceries to furniture. It's a demanding job, but it pays the bills. For a long time, I thought I was doing it all for the right reasons. My wife, Tiffany, and I built a life together. We had what I thought was an understanding, a partnership. I truly love her, and I believe she felt the same. From the beginning, we agreed that having children wasn't in our plans. It was a mutual decision, and we were content with it. We had our own rhythm, our own way of living. I spent long hours on the road, and she managed things at home. That was our arrangement. I won't sugarcoat it. Trucking is tough. You're constantly on the move, facing long nights, unpredictable schedules, and barely enough time to rest before the next job. Sometimes, I planned to be home for the weekend, but a last-minute delivery would pop up, delaying my return by a day or two. That's just how it was. Still, no matter how exhausting the job became, I always made a priority to come home whenever I could. To me, marriage wasn't just about making money and paying the bills. It was about being there, being present. Despite my fatigue, I always wanted to spend time with Tiffany. That's what I believe marriage was all about. And for a long time, I thought she felt the same way. Turns out I was wrong. I remember the moment I realized something had changed between us. By then, Tiffany and I had been married for 7 years. For most of our marriage, things felt steady. We weren't the most passionate couple, but we had a routine. When I returned from long hauls, she would always greet me with a hug, a kiss, and at least some excitement that I was back. But then, something shifted. The first thing I noticed was that she stopped initiating intimacy. Before, she would flirt, make little jokes, or snuggle up to me while we watched TV. But that stopped. At first, I thought she was just tired or stressed. I understood life can be exhausting, but it wasn't just a rough week or a bad month. It became our new normal. If I didn't make the first move, nothing happened. And even when I did, it felt like she was just going through the motions, like she was doing it out of obligation rather than desire. Then came the texts. When I was on the road, we used to text frequently. Small check-ins, little conversations. But suddenly, her responses became short and infrequent. I would send a message, and hours would pass before she replied, if she responded at all. And when she did, it was often just a simple, okay, or yeah. No follow-up, no curiosity about my day. It felt like she was slowly pulling away. At first, I convinced myself that people get comfortable in relationships, that maybe this was normal. But over time, I couldn't ignore the pattern. Our entire relationship had become one-sided. I was always the one reaching out, making plans, trying to keep things together. If I didn't start a conversation, we wouldn't have one. If I didn't suggest spending time together, we just existed in the same space, like distant roommates instead of a married couple. I kept hoping things would improve. But months turned into years, and the distance between us only widened. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I felt more alone in my marriage than I ever did when I was out on the road. One night, after an exhausting shift, I came home. Trucking isn't just a job. It's a lifestyle. Some days, I think I'll be home in the evening, but then a last-minute delivery comes up, offering just enough pay to make it worth the extra time. That's exactly what had happened. I thought I'd be home in a day, but 2 days turned into 3. By the time I finally walked through the door, all I wanted was a hot shower, a meal, and a good night's sleep. I hadn't even bothered to text Tiffany that I was coming home. She was used to my unpredictable schedule. As I stepped inside, the house was quiet except for a faint voice coming from the back porch. Tiffany was on the phone. She could have been talking to her sister or a friend. I kicked off my boots and headed to the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cabinet and filling it with water. I was so focused on quenching my thirst that I barely registered her words at first. But as I walked toward the bedroom, just a few feet away from the porch, I could hear her voice more clearly. I can't stand him anymore. I don't even know why I'm still here. I froze mid-step. My mind scrambled to process what I had just heard. Was she talking about me? No, that couldn't be right. But then I heard her sigh, followed by a pause. The person on the other end said something I couldn't make out, and then Tiffany spoke again. This time, her voice was crystal clear. He's just too convenient. Leaving him would be too much work. I haven't loved him in years. There are no words to describe how I felt at that moment. I had spent over a decade believing I had a partner, someone who loved me, even if things weren't perfect. I had sacrificed sleep, time, and comfort to provide a good life for us. And yet, in her own words, I was nothing more than an obligation, a convenience, someone she couldn't even stand. I walked into the bedroom, sitting down on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My hands rested on my knees, but I wasn't really there. I was lost in thought. Had she been pretending this entire time? My mind raced through our years together, searching for the moment when everything shifted. Had I been blind? Or had she just been that good at faking it? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no idea who I had been married to. I sat there motionless for what felt like an eternity. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't seem real anymore. Then the bedroom door creaked open. Tiffany stepped inside. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened, but she quickly masked it with a casual expression. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in," she said. She knew. Maybe she didn't know exactly how much I had heard, but she knew I had heard something. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. I had nothing to say that wouldn't either come out broken or full of rage. I watched as she hesitated, standing there like she wanted to say more. Without another glance in her direction, I pushed myself off the bed and mumbled something about taking a shower. I didn't wait for a response. I just walked straight into the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and turned on the water. I stood beneath the cascading water, allowing the scorching stream to pummel my skin, yet it did little to ease the constriction in my chest. I lost track of time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. But when I finally stepped out, I didn't join her in the bedroom. I wasn't in the mood for her attempts at idle chatter, and even worse, her silence. Instead, I made my way to the living room, switched on the television, and stared at the screen without truly watching. Normally, I'd come home with a story, something amusing from the highway, a bizarre encounter at a truck stop. I always had something to share. But tonight, I had nothing. And Tiffany? She didn't even ask. By the time I finally crawled into bed, she was already fast asleep. I lay there, gazing at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. If this was truly how she felt, then what was I still doing here? As the first traces of morning light seeped through the curtains, my decision became crystal clear. I was leaving. I got up without a sound, moving through the house like a shadow. I gathered only what mattered, just a few personal belongings. Everything else? Irrelevant. I had no interest in holding on to anything that tethered me to this place any longer. I didn't bother leaving a note. By the time I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp morning air, I had no clue what lay ahead. And, to be honest, I didn't care. Whatever came next had to be better than staying with someone who remained by my side purely out of convenience. Tiffany craved an easy life. Well, now she had it. I knew she wouldn't suspect anything immediately. My job had always kept me unpredictable. I could leave for a day and be gone for a week due to last-minute deliveries or unexpected delays. She was used to that. Normally, if I left while she was asleep, I'd send a text in the morning or call later in the day to check in. But this time, there was no reason to. Before leaving town, I stopped by the bank and withdrew as much cash as I could without raising suspicion. Then, I pulled out my phone, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in half. That tiny piece of plastic was her only direct link to me, and now it was gone. No calls, no texts, no explanations. I knew she'd eventually try to track me down, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Truckers aren't like your average 9-to-5 workers. We don't stay in one place. Even if she asked around, no one would be able to give her a definite answer. Maybe I had gone up north. Maybe I had switched companies. Maybe I was still out on the road somewhere. It would be a dead end. With my phone disconnected and my past severed, I drove. No destination, just distance. Eventually, I found myself in a small Texas town where people mind their own business and don't pry. It was perfect. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. I was simply a man starting over. As the months passed, I expected to feel regret or at least some semblance of guilt for abandoning my marriage the way I did. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I realized something. I didn't miss Tiffany at all. I learned that silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I took on odd jobs, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Some days, I worked at a local auto shop, repairing trucks like the ones I use to drive cross-country. Other days, I did yard work for elderly folks who paid me with home-cooked meals rather than money. It wasn't about the income. I had enough savings to get by. It was about doing something for myself, something that didn't feel like an obligation. For once, I wasn't wearing myself thin just to make someone else comfortable. I was living on my own terms. Back in my old life, my only real social interactions were with other truckers at rest stops or whatever minimal conversation Tiffany had the patience for. But here I had real friends. Guys who didn't care about my past, who never pried unless I chose to share. We'd sit around after work, drinking cheap beer, talking about life, work, and the best burger joints in town. Simple things. But things I hadn't realized I had been missing for so long. The best part? No expectations. No obligations. No one waiting for me to check in. No one counting down the days until I returned. If I wanted to take a road trip, I did. If I wanted to sleep in, I did. Every choice I made was for myself, not for someone else. And that was a kind of freedom I had never known before. I never thought I'd hear from Tiffany again. After disappearing for an entire year, I had carved out a new life. One where I didn't wake up feeling like a burden in my own home. To this day, I don't know how she found me. Did she track down old trucking buddies? Hire someone? Who knows? One afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Out of habit, I answered. "Sam, it's me." I didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? But she kept talking, her voice trembling, as if she had rehearsed this conversation 100 times. She said she never meant what she had said that night, that she was just frustrated, venting, and didn't know how to express herself. She even had the audacity to tell me she still loved me, but I had spent a year replaying her words in my mind, and I knew the truth. She hadn't been venting. She had been honest. She just never expected me to hear it. At first, I ignored her, blocked her number without a single response. But she didn't stop. She used different numbers, sending long, emotional texts filled with apologies, promises, and regret. She wrote about how empty the house felt without me, how she couldn't sleep at night, how she had made a terrible mistake. Then she tried guilt-tripping me. She claimed I had hurt her by leaving, that I should have given her a chance to explain, that we could have fixed this. But there was nothing left to fix. I saw through her desperation. She wasn't sorry for what she had said. She was sorry for the consequences. She thought I would always be there, no matter how little effort she put into our marriage. When I finally walked away, it wasn't love that made her chase after me. It was the realization that she had lost her safety net. Eventually, I gave her what she wanted, a response, but not the one she was hoping for. "I'll come back," I told her, "but not for you. I'm coming back to end the marriage." Officially. Silence. For the first time, after all those calls and messages, she had nothing to say. And honestly, I didn't care. Looking back, I never thought I'd be the type of man to just disappear. That wasn't my plan when I left. I wasn't trying to vanish forever. I just wanted her to understand what it felt like to lose someone. But the longer I stayed away, the more I realized something. I didn't miss her. Not even a little. And if I didn't miss her, what was the point of going back? Now, I see the signs had always been there. The way she stopped texting when I was on the road. The way she only touched me if I initiated it. For years, I told myself it was just a rough patch. Something all couples go through. But the truth? I was just convenient for her. I paid the bills. I gave her stability. Love? That had died long ago. I was just too blind or too hopeful to see it. If I've learned anything from this, it's that convenience is not love. Being tolerated is not the same as being cherished. If someone is only with you because leaving is too much effort, they aren't your partner. They're just someone sharing your space. And if you ever feel like you have to beg for effort, you're already losing. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed and confronted her, given her another chance? Or would you have left just like I did? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Someone out there might need to hear this.